gentlemen, good evening and welcome. My name is Ahab Downer, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you here tonight, not only as the director of the Green Overseas, or GO program, but also on behalf of a number of partners with whom we've organized this side event, namely FERDI, OACPS, OCTA, and UCOTA. We're all here at COP to discuss paths to limiting the impacts of climate change. We're also here at COP to forge and reinforce partnerships. And I think this side event is a perfect illustration of the great worth of partnerships. Together, we are stronger. Together and united, we are more effective. I'll be moderating our event tonight, and this is entirely in keeping with the mission of the Green Overseas program, which is to support the 25 overseas countries and territories of the United Kingdom and the European Union in their efforts to become more resilient to climate change and to infuse energy transition across their territories and countries. As you can see, tonight's topic is quite specific. We're talking about climate finance, and more specifically about the role of Multidimensional Vulnerability Index in leveraging finance for resilience building. We have a lot of interesting people that you'll hear from tonight, and I'll run through it very briefly. Opening remarks were made by Ms. Cristelle Pratt of OACPS. And we'll have our first panel, two panelists who will give us a scientific, economic, and resilience-related perspective of climate change and how it relates to finance for these vulnerable countries and territories. We'll then take some questions, if you have any, from here present in the room or anybody who's joining us online. Then we'll move to a second panel where we have three ministers, two from the Caribbean and one from Greenland. So we'll get some interesting perspectives from individuals experiencing climate change impacts in their countries and territories. Just before we hear from the ministers, we'll have an opportunity to see a short film that's been produced by UCOTA illustrating some of the impacts that we all know to be occurring. Then we'll move on to a third panel where we'll hear from the donors specifically from a gentleman from the Caribbean Development Bank, Mr. Isaac Solomon, and from a representative from the Agence Française de Développement, or AFD, Mr. Roland Chabrol. And as we close up, we'll hear from Mr. Nicolas Chenet, who heads up the Sustainable Development Department at Expertise France. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ms. Cristelle Pratt. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahab, as moderator for this evening. Honourable ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It is indeed an honour to welcome you all to this UNFCCC official side event. And as Ahab has already said, the role of Multidimensional Vulnerability Index in leveraging finance for resilience building. On behalf of the Organisation of African, Caribbean and Pacific States, we use OACPS as shorthand, and co-organisers OCTA, UCOTA, FERDI, Expertise France, and the Green Overseas Programme, go. I'm not telling you to go, Ahab. Of the European Union, which I recognise and acknowledge with appreciation for their excellent collaboration and contributions in the co-convening of this event. Thank you very much. May I also thank each one of you present here today for your commitment to attend and participate in a discussion that is of immense importance to many vulnerable island countries and territories as they strive to build resilient and sustainable societies and communities. Because underpinning such ambitions and aspirations is the need to be able to access and leverage concessional finance, or to leverage finance more broadly. I need not describe in detail the current state of the world we live in today, because we know, feel and experience the global challenges and the intertwined, interconnected crises that confront us. But for some, these lived realities are even more stark, such as on small islands. Economic, social and environmental shocks, ranging from the adverse effects of climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, economic inequality and record debt levels, are all but choking progress for achieving the 2030 Development Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement, and particularly for the most vulnerable small island states and territories with their unique geographies and specificities. Many of the global crises that small island countries and territories now face are not of our making. For example, in respect of the cause of the climate emergency, we know that SIDS contribute less than 0.2% of total emissions, yet are at the front line of its impacts and feel the brunt of more intense and more frequent extreme climate and weather events, such as tropical cyclones, heavy rains and flooding, and storm surges. A single extreme event can erase years of development gains, and the now more frequent events means that full recovery can either be short-lived or never achieved. While 39 of OACPS's 79 members are small island developing states, all 79 OACPS members have lived the experience of devastating extreme climate and weather events that have also wiped out development gains that have taken them decades to achieve. But for SIDS, not only are they extremely vulnerable to these damaging extreme events, the existential threat as a result of sea level rise is also a foreboding reality if all climate actions are not implemented now, including the provision of requisite, appropriate levels and kinds of financing to build resilience. With the increasing multiple shocks and hazard risks, our vulnerable developing countries face mounting financial needs for resilience building. Regrettably, a majority of the extremely vulnerable SIDS who have attained middle and high income country status are now unable to access concessional finance, which is much needed to address the pressing challenges that threaten the well-being of their communities and livelihoods to achieve and build and maintain sustainability and resilience. And there are others that are preparing to graduate from their current least developed country status, which will place them in a similar predicament. So clearly, the current development challenges and frequent shocks faced by the most vulnerable and exposed of all countries require a rethink, reform and overhaul of the old way of relying on GNI per capita as the sole criteria for determining access to concessional financing, or not. We need new approaches and revamped financing mechanisms to facilitate access to concessional development financing if our members are to navigate and thrive through an ever-changing world punctuated by multiple recurring crises and emergencies. The OACPS, as mandated by the Summit of Heads of States and Governments in 2019 and 2022, has developed a multidimensional vulnerability index, and we call it fondly OMVI, as a tool that we hope will inform access to concessional financing for our members, many with inherent vulnerabilities and enduring high costs to build and maintain resilience to adverse shocks. The OMVI was also developed as a contribution to the efforts of the UN High-Level Panel for a Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, which aims to complement GNI per capita as a criteria for determining eligibility to access grants and concessional finance. In this regard, OACPS prepared a comprehensive submission to the UN High-Level Panel for MVI's draft report last July. We are well aware of the body of work on MVI that has been established over the last 3 decades and the sophistication and complexities of many MVIs already developed. And we commend the efforts of small island developing states in their unrelenting and ongoing leadership and advocacy for the MVI as a complementary measure to determine access to concessional finance. The OACPS Vulnerability Index is a multidimensional composite index that includes economic, environmental, and social dimensions of vulnerability that measures exposure to adverse external shocks. It has taken account of the structural vulnerabilities of countries, including their size, export concentration, trade openness, health features, and exposure to natural disasters that make countries particularly vulnerable to external shocks. The methodology of constructing the OACPS MVI has embraced the STAR principle for being simple, transparent, affordable, and reproducible. It uses 7 global databases that cover 177 developed and developing countries. Work is also underway to finalise an OACPS Multidimensional Resilience Index to complement the OMVI, noting that vulnerability and resilience are 2 sides of the same coin. The OMVI has received the endorsement of its membership. Going forward, and in recognising the significance of adaptation and resilience building to the severe risks linked to climate change, OACPS at this COP28 launched with the government of Malta an initiative to develop a tailor-made, scalable tool of universal application which measures climate vulnerability and resilience. The Climate OMVI will be developed over the next months, and we hope to share it at the upcoming 4th International SIDS Conference to be held in Antigua and Barbuda from the 27th to the 30th of May next year. Our aim today is to not only shed light on the multifaceted nature of vulnerability, but also highlight the important role of innovative vulnerability indices as credible complementary tools in shaping the financing mechanisms that respond to current development challenges for countries and territories that are most at risk to the climate emergency. We have, as Ahab has mentioned, very esteemed speakers who will bring diverse perspectives from a wealth of expertise. And I encourage you to actively engage in the discussions and share your insights so that together we can amplify our voices on the need to revamp existing financing mechanisms so that all the most vulnerable to climate change have access to financing, and in our case, to concessional financing. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Cristelle. Now I'd like to ask Dr.El, Cherif, and Drs. Boussichas to come up, have a seat at our panel, if you will, please. We have simultaneous translation English to French available with your headsets. And those of you who don't speak French, I encourage you to get a headset, as Dr. Boussichas will be delivering his remarks in French.
Bonjour à tous. So, as there is a simultaneous translation, I will speak in French, and I'm sorry for that. And so, take some headset if you need. Okay. Bien, bonjour à tous. Donc d'abord, je voudrais... alors, je vous laisse peut-être le temps de prendre des casques. Ah oui, on pose la question de quel est le canal pour comprendre le français. What is the channel to understand French and English? 3, 4? 4. Oui, mais for what? For English or French? Okay. So for English.
For English, it's channel 3, I understand.
Okay, thank you for your understanding. So, bonjour à tous. D'abord, je remercie les partenaires de la FERDI d'avoir souhaité parler de la vulnérabilité aujourd'hui, qui est un concept dont on parle beaucoup ces derniers temps, mais qui existe depuis fort longtemps. Alors, je voudrais d'abord peut-être rappeler la définition tout simplement de la vulnérabilité telle qu'elle est aujourd'hui normalisée, standardisée par les Nations Unies. Donc la vulnérabilité, c'est un risque. C'est le risque qu'un pays soit affecté de manière permanente par des chocs d'origine exogène. Les 3 mots importants, risque, choc et exogène. Alors elle dépend de l'ampleur probable de ces chocs, de l'exposition du pays à ces mêmes chocs et de sa capacité à y faire face, c'est ce qu'on appelle la résilience. Alors, elle est multidimensionnelle, elle est à la fois économique, environnementale et climatique, et sociopolitique. Et on distingue, et c'est très important, d'une part, la vulnérabilité qu'on dit structurelle, c'est-à-dire celle qui ne dépend pas de la volonté de la politique du pays, comme par exemple le fait d'être enclavé, l'élévation du niveau de la mer, ou la dépendance à l'égard d'une matière première dont le prix mondial serait volatile. Donc, d'une part, et d'autre part, la vulnérabilité générale, qui est en fait la vulnérabilité structurelle à laquelle on ajoute les éléments liés à la politique actuelle du gouvernement. Et ce concept est très important, parce que d'abord, ces chocs ont un impact négatif significatif sur le développement des pays dits vulnérables. Et il est par ailleurs très utile, d'abord pour comprendre ce qui handicape structurellement un pays. C'est dans cette perspective d'ailleurs que va se positionner notamment les travaux du Dr. Cherif après moi. Mais par ailleurs, c'est également très utile pour influencer les politiques publiques internationales de financement du développement durable. Et c'est d'ailleurs une question de justice qui vise à compenser un handicap structurel subi par un pays pour lequel il n'est absolument pas responsable. Alors la question c'est comment mesurer cette fameuse vulnérabilité multidimensionnelle. Alors il y a 3, en gros, je condense un petit peu parce que j'ai que 5 minutes, mais il y a 3 concepts, 3 conditions à respecter. La première, c'est évidemment, il faut un indice multidimensionnel, ça paraît logique. Le deuxième, c'est que l'indice doit être universel. Et on entend par là qu'il doit être mesuré pour au moins tous les pays en développement, afin que la vulnérabilité mesurée puisse être comparée à celle des autres pays. Parce que là, c'est un concept qui est relatif, bien entendu. Et troisièmement, l'indice doit distinguer ce qui relève de la politique du gouvernement de ce qui est structurel, d'accord? Donc il doit pouvoir séparer ce qui relève de la politique du gouvernement de ce qui ne relève pas de la politique du gouvernement. Et ça, c'est pas facile. Alors, de nombreux indices existent et tentent de mesurer ce qu'est la vulnérabilité, mais au final, très peu remplissent finalement ces trois conditions. Alors jusqu'à présent, il existait l'indice de vulnérabilité économique et environnementale des Nations Unies. Il existe aussi l'indice de vulnérabilité universelle, le UVI, qui a été développé d'ailleurs par la FERDI, mais qui est l'indice de vulnérabilité du Commonwealth, utilisé par le Commonwealth, et qui est un très très bon indice. Et il y a désormais l'indice de vulnérabilité multidimensionnelle, MVI, qui a été élaboré récemment par un panel de haut niveau des Nations Unies, et je dois le dire, avec l'appui technique d'une équipe de chercheurs de la FERDI. Vous avez dans la salle Soso Feinduno, un chercheur qui a été dans cette équipe technique et qui pourra répondre parfaitement à toutes vos questions. Alors, qu'est-ce que c'est que ce fameux MVI? C'est un indice de mesure de la vulnérabilité des pays. Alors, il couvre les trois dimensions du développement durable en combinant des indicateurs qui mesurent l'ampleur et l'exposition des pays au choc, et d'autre part, le manque de résilience structurelle de chaque pays. Vous avez une petite infographie qui résume très très sommairement le concept, et il ne comprend donc pas d'indicateur qui évalue la politique actuelle du pays, afin de ne pas récompenser in fine des gouvernements dont la vulnérabilité viendrait ou proviendrait d'une mauvaise gestion ou de leurs propres décisions. C'est une question d'aléa moral. Alors, c'est extrêmement résumé parce qu'encore une fois, on n'a que 5 minutes, mais on pourra répondre à toutes les questions après. Et alors, pour finir, là, on pourrait se dire, mais un indicateur de vulnérabilité multidimensionnelle, c'est très bien, mais ok, mais pourquoi faire? Alors, il y a 3 utilisations principales possibles. La première, c'est qu'il peut contribuer à identifier une catégorie de pays, comme l'EVI pour les PMA. L'indice de vulnérabilité économique est un des indicateurs d'identification d'une catégorie, les pays les moins avancés, les PMA. La deuxième utilisation, c'est qu'il peut être utilisé comme critère d'éligibilité pour le financement. Et la troisième utilisation, et j'ai envie de dire surtout celle-ci, c'est il peut être utilisé comme critère d'allocation des ressources concessionnelles. C'est d'ailleurs l'utilisation attendue principale. Je rappelle que les Nations Unies ont officiellement demandé qu'un tel indice soit utilisé pour allouer les ressources concessionnelles, la vulnérabilité étant un des critères pour cela, et complémentaire aux critères plus classiques comme le revenu par habitant, comme les critères de performance si chers à la Banque mondiale et aux autres banques multilatérales de développement. Donc pour conclure, je voudrais souligner quand même que le MVI, qui a été proposé et qui est presque adopté par les Nations Unies, c'est une étape importante dans la prise en compte de la vulnérabilité dans l'accès des pays vulnérables aux financements internationaux, puisqu'il permet en quelque sorte de hiérarchiser les pays selon leur vulnérabilité, même si ce ne doit pas être le seul critère, évidemment. Et même si, on peut le dire, certains aspects de sa conception peuvent probablement être encore améliorés. Et je voudrais profiter, et je finirai par là, du fait que nous sommes à la COP pour parler un petit peu de la dimension climat de cette vulnérabilité multidimensionnelle, pour poser une question qui est d'actualité. Pour les guichets concessionnels qui ont dédié au financement climat, et notamment pour l'adaptation, une question qui se pose, c'est faut-il utiliser un indice de vulnérabilité multidimensionnelle ou faut-il développer, ou en tout cas utiliser, un indice plus spécifique qui mesurerait la vulnérabilité physique au changement climatique. Et je dis ça parce que, par exemple, à la FERDI, nous en avons développé un qui remplit les 3 conditions tout à l'heure. Je vous remercie beaucoup de m'avoir écouté. Bonne session.
Thank you, Dr. Boussichas. Merci. Dr.El, Cherif, over to you.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I am truly honored to be here today, and I extend my sincere gratitude to the Association of Overseas Countries and Territories of the European Union for this invaluable opportunity to share my insight during the COP28. I know I'm coming from a scientific background, and it will be really hard to show slides with equations and stuff, so I decided to read a speech which easily will explain to you how can we reach there. So in my exploration of coastal water, dynamic, remote sensing, GIS, and blue economy, I have been driven by a profound passion for understanding and preserving our coastal marine ecosystems, such as small island developing states and overseas countries and territories in the scientific point of view. Safeguarding vulnerable areas from climate change impacts necessitates a crucial steps developing and measuring the vulnerability of SIDS and OACPS. The multidimensional vulnerability indices is transformative, guiding us through interconnected systems. Practical examples and case studies demonstrate how the MVA can be a force in assessing vulnerabilities in coastal and marine environments. The blue economy vision, leveraging artificial intelligence, remote sensing, GIS, robotics, and computer vision provides crucial data and indices for informed decision making. In this scientific pursuit, vulnerability is viewed as a dynamic state shaped by interaction between environmental, social, and economic factors. Remote sensing and GIS emerge as a pivotal tools, offering real-time data, crucial for unraveling vulnerabilities in the complex interplay of human activities and environmental response. Moreover, the scientific measurements entice the development of robust indices to encapsulate the multidimensional nature of this region. The proposed indicators align seamlessly with this scientific endeavor, serving as beacons to quantify vulnerabilities across economic, environmental, and social dimensions. This scientific journey goes beyond vulnerabilities identification. It involves the creation of predictive models and scenarios analysis. Advanced scientific methodologies enable us to project future vulnerabilities, providing decision-making with crucial insights for strategic planning and adaptive measures. To measure vulnerability scientifically in SIDS and OCT, it requires the integration of established theories adapted to the unique context of this region. Continuous collaboration between scientific communities, policymakers, and local stakeholders ensure accurate and contextual relevant vulnerability assessment. Developing and measuring vulnerability indices in these areas presents several challenges and limitations from a scientific perspective. First, many SIDS and overseas territories lack comprehensive data sets, and the available data may be outdated or of varying quality, affecting the reliability of the indices. Second, coastal and marine environment exhibit high spatial and temporal variability. Capturing this variability accurately requires a dense and frequent data collection network, which may not be feasible for remote and economically challenged regions. Third, vulnerability is often interconnected with complex systems, including ecological, social, and economic factors, developing indices that accurately capture these interdependencies in challenging due to the non-linear and dynamic nature of these systems. Fourth, understanding the interaction between human activity and the environment is crucial. However, quantitating and integrating this interaction into vulnerability indices is complex, as it involves socio-economic factors, cultural aspects, and governance structures. Fifth, future climate scenarios are subject to change, and predicting the exact nature and magnitude of climate impact of SEDs and overseas territories is challenging. Six, the effectiveness of adaptation strategies and resilience building efforts can influence vulnerability. And finally, many SIDs and overseas territories may lack the financial, technical, and human resources needed to conduct extensive vulnerability assessments. Despite these challenges, ladies and gentlemen, ongoing research and technological advancement coupled with international collaboration can contribute to overcoming some of these limitations and enhance the robustness of vulnerability indices for its IDS, states, and overseas territories. In closing, our journey into scientifically measuring vulnerability in small island developing states and overseas countries and territories underscores the delicate balance between human activity and environmental resilience. The multidimensional vulnerability indices stand as a transformative tool, guiding us through interconnected systems toward resilient coastal futures. And to summarize challenges, and I recommend 6. First, enhance data quality. Second, technological innovations. And third, interdisciplinary collaboration. Fourth, capacity building. Fifth, scenario analysis. And the last one, ethical integration. I believe, ladies and gentlemen, by embracing these recommendations, we advance our scientific pursuits, contributing to a resilience and sustainable future for coastal region such as its IDEs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cherif. I'm just wondering if we're on time, how we're doing on time, and if we can take some questions. Would anybody like to ask a question of our panelists? We have a question over here, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. And this has been, it was a great introduction of Cristelle, and this has been a really interesting debate. I think one of the things we need to reflect on is that it's the way you decide how money is going to be allocated. The important point is at the start of that the pot needs to be big enough to provide the funding that is required. So however you divide up the pot, the most important thing is what comes out of this, and the next COP, which is going to be a finance COP, is that the pot is sufficient to deliver what has been promised. So that's the key point. So I'll move on to my question now. I was at a conference in the Ocean Pavilion earlier, where this question came up about how development aid is used and allocated, and how concessionary finance or other climate finance could be used in the future. And Mary Robinson was there, the ex-president of the Irish Republic. And she said it's important that that it's looked at in the round. So you don't want to position, and I'm going to ask this to the panelists, if we move towards an MVI system away from the traditional ODA, OECD system, are there going to be losers? And if there are going to be losers, are those losers in terms of less money? How is that going to be looked at? Or is this proposal is that the traditional development system stays in place, but MVI is used specifically around climate-related and ecological-related, or even, it's hard to say whether, increase in hurricanes, you could have a philosophical argument about if that's where that lies. But is that going to, is the traditional system going to stay in place, and this will be for the added money, or will there be, or do you think there should be a move that all development aid should be done through an MVI system? And if so, will there be losers in certain LDCs globally?
Well, that was it. Thank you for that. Gentlemen, did you, Dr. Boussichas?
I answer now?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
So in French, if it's possible. Oui, votre question, elle est tout à fait pertinente. Et elle s'est posée...
Dr. Boussichas, just allow the English speakers an
Okay.
opportunity to put their headsets on. And if I may, slow down just a little bit so that the translators can keep up with you, please.
Il y a beaucoup de questions en fait dans votre question, mais la question principale c'est quid des perdants? D'abord, c'est le principe d'utiliser la vulnérabilité qui est discuté. Après, les Nations Unies ont le MVI. Si la Banque mondiale introduit dans son modèle, ce qui serait très souhaitable, la vulnérabilité, il est possible qu'elle utilise un indice de vulnérabilité qu'elle aura elle-même développé, c'est tout à fait possible. L'intérêt, enfin surtout, ce qu'il faut absolument, c'est que les principes soient à peu près les mêmes, même si ce n'est pas exactement le même indice. Maintenant, quid des perdants? Mais j'ai envie de dire, si l'enveloppe augmente, il n'y a pas de perdants. C'est la responsabilité des bailleurs, ça, de ne pas faire de perdants. C'est pas... là, on parle de critères objectifs d'allocation. La vulnérabilité n'est certainement pas, ne doit absolument pas être le seul critère. Il y a les critères à mon avis, même s'il est très imparfait, les critères de revenu est essentiel. Le critère, la Banque mondiale sera très attachée aux critères de performance, et c'est tout à fait légitime. Le critère de vulnérabilité vient rajouter de façon complémentaire une dimension qui n'existait pas avant, qui est très importante. Et on rappelle, le principe principal qui doit être tenu, c'est celui de la structuralité, c'est-à-dire l'exogénéité de la mesure. On n'est pas censé récompenser des pays qui sont vulnérables parce qu'ils sont mal gérés. Donc on doit expurger cette dimension-là qui est non structurée. Donc s'il y a des perdants, c'est parce que les enveloppes probablement ne seront pas... Enfin, si les enveloppes sont augmentées, il n'y a pas de perdants. Voilà. On avait fait une simulation pour le Fonds africain de développement. Parce en fait, à la FERDI, on a beaucoup travaillé sur ces indicateurs et beaucoup avec les institutions. L'Union européenne l'a appliqué, par exemple. La Banque caribéenne, qui est représentée aujourd'hui, l'a appliqué, ce principe d'introduire de la vulnérabilité. Donc politiquement, c'est tout à fait faisable. La Banque africaine de développement a failli le faire. On a travaillé 2 ans avec eux. J'ai un rapport ici, d'ailleurs, qui est très très bien, qui a servi de base à tous les autres, d'ailleurs, travaux. Et puis finalement, bon, c'est la décision qui a été politique, qui leur appartient, ils n'ont pas encore franchi la frontière de la vulnérabilité. Mais on a fait, dans ce cadre de ce travail-là, des simulations, voir qui seraient les perdants, selon le modèle que la Banque africaine aurait pu retenir, en incluant de la vulnérabilité en plus de leurs critères. Et il se trouve que il y avait une redistribution surtout entre les pays les plus performants, mais ce n'était pas forcément au détriment des pays les plus pauvres. Donc ce qui peut être intuitif ne l'est pas forcément, mais surtout, encore une fois, je pense que la la question de la gestion des perdants revient plutôt à celui qui définit l'enveloppe. Voilà.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Dr. Cherif, yeah, briefly, please. Thank you.
Point of view, if we make a great multidimensional vulnerable indices, taking in account the urgent area where we need really to have this fund in the right place, the losers, I believe, are in the right situation. We will be happy for them because we need to give the vent for the most vulnerable area. For my side, as a scientist, I need to improve the effectiveness of this MVA. So in order to give to the right area where we need the funding. So logically, we cannot start from the like a region where they can a bit improve themselves and leave the other regions where they are really in vulnerable situation. So scientifically, in my point of view, every time we need like this limitation to solve in order to prepare these indices, and then we do a new classification. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Cherif. We have also somebody in our audience, Emily Wilkinson, who would like to give a brief answer to that question.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in. I couldn't resist answering the question. I work for ODI, Overseas Development Institute. We did some research looking at the amount of finance that goes to small island developing states. And it's really such a small amount that I think setting it up as a zero-sum game is not a very helpful way of presenting this, because it would be very, very small amounts of money, and I don't think LDCs would really notice the difference. That's one thing. And secondly, if we're talking about finance for building resilience, then it's really important that it's directed at countries that have these structural vulnerabilities in order that official development assistance is actually effective in what it's meant to be doing. So I just wanted to add that.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Wilkinson. Another gentleman, I'm afraid we're out of time, but we'll give you an opportunity just afterwards. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to come and have a seat. We're going to watch a 6-minute film, and then I'm going to ask the honorable ministers to come and sit at the panel desk. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
The United Kingdom and its overseas territories constitute the world's 5th largest marine estate. We are custodians of incredible biodiversity, with more than 90% of the UK's unique species. And our precious ocean ecosystems span the Antarctic to the Caribbean, the South Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. But a new study shows these small communities and our seas are some of the most vulnerable to the impact of climate change.
Have you heard about the blue economy?
The what?
The blue economy.
What is that?
According to the World Bank, the blue economy is the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods, and jobs, while preserving the health of the ocean ecosystem.
What do all those big words mean?
They mean the ocean is important to our way of life. Many activities in and around the ocean create jobs for persons to support their families. These activities make our lives better and are part of what we call the blue economy.
First of all, a sanctuary marine protected area is one of the largest in the world, covering around 445,000 square kilometers. It is home to over 500,000 breeding seabirds, including the endemic Ascension Island frigate.
Its sandy beaches support the second largest green turtle nesting population in the Atlantic.
Its marine environment is healthy, supporting abundance of predators such as tuna, marlin, and shark.
Strong coral reefs are our first line of defense against intense storm waves. Healthy seagrass beds keep the landscape in place, slowing down waves and providing a home for the sea creatures we depend on. Native coastal plants like mangroves and beach grasses help to fortify our coastline, protecting our coastal communities by reducing the risk of flooding and erosion from storms. And our native forests can protect us from landslides and control flooding.
Stronger and more frequent hurricanes, longer periods of drought, sea level rise, and higher temperatures are already impacting our communities, our livelihoods, and our security. While we alone can't prevent a changing climate or natural disasters, we can act locally to minimize the impact to our communities. If we take nature into account, every time we act, we can harness its power to reduce the devastation caused by natural disasters.
The Falkland Islands are already witnessing the effects of climate change. Extreme weather events are starting to dry and erode our soils, which negatively affects the terrestrial ecosystems. Habitat restoration is critical to help preserve the areas most affected by a changing climate and to protect our unique biodiversity. We are resilient in the face of adversity and we remain committed to protecting our environment for future generations.
If we take nature into account every time we act, we can harness its power to reduce the devastation caused by natural disasters. Our government is partnering with the UK government to identify solutions to reduce the risks of flooding from storms, improve the ability of our lands and seas to bounce back after disasters and make them healthier, and to use the strength of nature to fortify the coastline and protect the landscape around our homes.
Islands beaches, some of the most remote in the world, are becoming saturated with the world's debris, with tons of plastic and rubbish disrupting the habitats of the region's endemic species. With unparalleled urgency, territory governments are at the forefront of work on ocean management, nature-based solutions, adaptation, and resilience.
The St. Helena Cloud Forest Project is a highly collaborative, multi-year project to implement the St. Helena Peaks National Park Management Plan. Approximately 25% of the water used on St. Helena comes direct from stream and spring flows intercepted in just 2 of the peak's catchment areas. While rainfall in the peaks is important, it is estimated that up to 60% of the fresh water on St. Helena comes from mist capture, and the endemic vegetation is far more effective at this than invasive species like flax.
South Georgia's wild inhabitants are now facing another danger. Since I was first here, the island's glaciers have retreated, some by 500 meters. This is a photograph of St. Andrews Bay in 1975. And this is the same place a few decades later. A 2.5-degree rise in air temperatures in the past 70 years means Antarctica is one of the fastest warming regions on the planet.
On Tristan, we have the remotest community in the world, and now we got the world's 4th biggest marine reserve. We depend on our ocean, and we want to keep it healthy for my generation and all together generations that will follow us.
Stronger and more frequent hurricanes, longer periods of drought, sea level rise, and higher temperatures are already impacting our communities, our livelihoods, and our security. While we alone can't prevent a changing climate or natural disasters, we can act locally to minimize the impact to our communities. If we take nature into account every time we act, we can harness its power to reduce the devastation caused by natural disasters.
Working collectively and with the support of the UK, we are already leading on huge steps to protect the world's oceans and avoid climate breakdown. Together, we've come so far, but there's so much more to do.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Some pretty striking images. Thank you, Yukuta, for sharing that with us. Now I'd like to ask the honorable ministers to come and take a place. All three, if you will, please. You all choose your own seat, if you will. So our second panel, we have Honorable Josephine Connolly of Turks and Caicos, Honorable Quincia Gumbs-Marie of Anguilla, and Honorable Kalistat Lund of Greenland. First, we'll be hearing remarks from Honorable Josephine Connolly. Please.
Thank you very much. Pleasant evening, ladies and gentlemen, and it's an honor for me to be here to speak to you tonight, and I'm grateful for this opportunity by the organizers of COP 28. Turks and Caicos Islands, similar to its sister territories, particularly those in the Caribbean, are highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. Our country is exposed to a range of climate hazards, including hurricanes, sea level rise, and coastal erosion, which threatens our infrastructure, economy, and social well-being. Due to the nature of our topography and geography, our livelihoods are intricately tied to our environment, and the effects of climate change are a direct risk to our survival. Ladies and gentlemen, let me underscore the unique challenges faced by the Turks and Caicos Islands in the context of climate change. Our nation's vulnerability is not a distant concept. It is an imminent reality that demands urgent attention. The topography and geography that define our islands render us particularly susceptible to the adverse impacts of climate change. Hurricanes, sea level rise, and coastal erosion are not abstract threats, but daily concerns that jeopardize our infrastructure, our economy, and the very fabric of our society. Our commitment to self-financing initiatives is commendable, yet the inherent limitations of our small population, constrained financial resources, and technical capacity have brought us to an untenable juncture. We find ourselves at a critical crossroads where the consequences of climate change not only threaten our immediate survival, but also hinder our ability to foster sustainable development. The increased frequency and intensity of climate-related events, such as major hurricanes, exacerbate the strain on our economy, limiting the funds available for crucial development projects. Regrettably, the Turks and Caicos Islands, like other UK overseas territories, currently lack access to crucial finance mechanisms under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change or the Paris Agreement. This includes notable funds such as the Global Environment Facility, Adaptation Fund, Green Climate Fund, and the new Loss and Damage Fund. Despite our strong case for international climate finance due to vulnerability, biodiversity risks, and financial constraints, and despite our unwavering efforts, the Turks and Caicos Islands face a unique predicament in the international arena. Our semi-autonomous status as overseas territories hinder access to vital international climate finance mechanisms, hindering our ability to adequately address the challenges at hand. As we champion the cause of climate resilience, we appeal for a recognition of our distinctive circumstances and collaborative effort to unlock the necessary financial resources. We are determined to explore innovative financing solutions to mobilize additional resources for climate action. Initiatives such as green bonds, debt for climate swaps, and risk insurance mechanisms can play a pivotal role in supporting sustainable climate finance. Only through tailored support and innovative financing solutions can we ensure the sustainability and prosperity of the Turks and Caicos Islands for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Connolly. Now we'll hear from the Minister from Anguilla.
Thank you. I note the subtitle of this panel. The time has come to acknowledge the plight of vulnerable countries and territories. I appreciate particular mention of the territories, and I acknowledge the creators of this event for the meticulous way it was handled, because very often the conversation and the sentence ends at countries, and we find ourselves locked out, imprisoned in the periphery. Ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good evening. As the global climate crisis intensifies, our quest for economic growth and diversification is constantly overshadowed by the looming threat of disasters between June and November of each year. While this definite period of uncertainty might allow us to prepare and mitigate as much as we can, it is the indefinite periods of uncertainty that reminds us that our survival depends on our capacity to cope with and adapt to multiple hazards. Our vulnerability to negative climate change impacts is not unique, but when assessed in conjunction with existing vulnerabilities relating to our land size, our population, location, geopolitical status, and limited economic products, there should be no questioning why we need global assistance that is contingent upon nothing else but these inherent vulnerabilities. The emergence of tourism as our main industry has been due in large part to the beauty and richness of our coastal marine ecosystems. As such, any threat to these resources is a threat to the sustainability of our tourism products and ultimately our economic viability. Slow onset events like coastal erosion have significantly altered our coastal landscapes, creating zones of high risk in the very locations that are ideal for tourism-related infrastructural development. Similarly, sea level rise, ocean warming, and the loss of biodiversity weaken our defensive capacity and pave the way for destruction during extreme weather events like hurricanes and floods. Large-scale damage to mangrove ecosystems has left coastal properties and communities further exposed, which means then that if we were to experience another catastrophic event, the damage would be even more catastrophic. While stakeholders in this industry have looked to banks and insurance companies to recover and rebuild critical infrastructure, the quality of our tourism product is steadily and simultaneously undermined by the introduction and spread of invasive non-native species that reduce the health and diversity of marine ecosystems, and the transmission of stony coral tissue loss disease, resulting in high coral mortality and low capacity to replenish, strengthen, and defend our coasts. Warming seas combined with changing ocean currents have introduced yet another threat to tourism in Anguilla in the form of sargassum, the scale of which is impossible to predict and incredibly expensive to manage. The connection between climate change and tourism in Anguilla demonstrates that if we fail to adapt, then we fail to make the progress necessary to support self-determination. We are trapped. Anguilla has been proactive in doing whatever we can, wherever we can, with what little we have, to help us to mitigate and adapt to climate change impacts, despite knowing that long-term adaptation and resilience cannot be achieved without sustainable global assistance. The establishment of our National Ocean Governance Committee, development of the Blue Anguilla Implementation Plan, and signing on to the UK-funded Blue Belt Program have catalyzed our commitment to the development of the blue economy in Anguilla through thematic areas including environmental protection, waste management, and renewable energy. We have spearheaded the renewable energy transition through implementation of renewable energy projects for critical infrastructure, transportation, and the creation of a renewable energy unit in the public sector. We have invested in technical expertise, capacity building, and innovative technology to transform our food systems. We have pursued short-term financing for over 9 projects that focus on ecosystem and habitat restoration, biosecurity, disaster risk reduction, and environmental conservation, all of which have built-in public education and awareness components that will encourage the behavioral change necessary to support sustainable development. In addition to all of this, we have been working diligently to reform and strengthen our regulatory frameworks to improve compliance and guarantee evidence-based decision-making. However, despite our best efforts to lead by example as we navigate our frontline exposure to this global crisis, inherent vulnerabilities prevent us from going much further alone. Investing in climate action for territories like Anguilla often means that we have to divert, adjust, rearrange, and restructure funding for national programming that is required to achieve a healthy and prosperous nation. We find ourselves having to reprioritize core priorities and are therefore unable to creatively reimagine development and resilience because we are constantly in survival mode. This mode of reality intensifies particularly after extreme weather events, pandemics, and recessions, when we are required to do so much more with so much less. Budgets that do not have the scope to simultaneously deliver on climate action and fulfill business as usual results in perpetual deficits. The effective and sustainable implementation of climate action goals requires us to first address existing gaps relating to data, technical capacity, technology, and financial resources. The short-term nature of most of the projects of which we have received funding means that in order for us to establish a continuous flow of data that is required for effective monitoring and evaluation systems, we must constantly reapply for short-term funding. Similarly, full workloads and limited human resource results in high turnover rates. This means that technical capacity is lost with built capacity to use innovative technology. We cannot close the implementation gap until we stop recycling resources and receive meaningful investment to fulfill our climate action goals. Access to sustainable climate finance is the single most significant barrier to climate resilience for Anguilla. Constrained by our status as United Kingdom overseas territories, we do not qualify for international climate funding that is delivered through the UNFCCC, nor are we considered eligible for UK development assistance because of our GDP. Research has shown that climate finance is most effective when delivered directly to developing territories and small island states where the climate crisis is embedded in their everyday lived experiences. However, global stakeholders, particularly the United Kingdom, who are acutely aware of our unique devastating situation, have made no effort to channel dedicated climate financing to the overseas territories, even after making the unilateral decision to withdraw from the European Union, which was providing impactful climate finance and climate action support to the territories for many years. While the UK continues to pledge billions, millions, billions on the international scale and to support developing countries around the globe, Anguilla and other overseas territories are at the intersection of extreme vulnerability and United Kingdom governance. We remain imprisoned in the periphery. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister Gumbs-Marie. Now we're going to hear from Minister Lund. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to speak about access to climate finance for overseas countries and territories such as Greenland today. First of all, I'm very happy to announce that the Parliament of Greenland unanimously voted for the government's proposal to join the Paris Agreement on November 14th this year. This is an important This is an important step in Greenlandic climate politics, as it gives us the opportunity to take an active role in the international climate negotiations and let our voice to be heard. The melting ice sheet of Greenland has become an international symbol of climate change. It is mentioned as one of the first topics when discussing climate change. However, the Greenlandic people who are directly affected by the changing climate are rarely mentioned. And for a long time, our inclusion in climate discussions has been limited. The Arctic is warming up 4 times faster than the global average. Not only does this have major and severe consequences for our environment, our people are largely affected. I would like to present you with a current example. Hunters of Avanasrock in the northernmost part of Greenland are currently suffering for the lack of sea ice. Under normal conditions, sea ice is formed in October, but in recent years, the ice has not come until December. With the sea, it comes seals and other animals that are crucial for our hunters. Without the sea ice, our hunters are not able to go hunting and provide for their families. But it is important for me to state that we are not passive bystanders to climate change. In fact, Greenland has reduced its emissions of greenhouse gases by almost 20% compared to 2010. We are building hydropower plants, expanding solar energy, and testing windmills in Greenland. I have started the process of developing a climate change strategy. It will be developed in close cooperation with local communities, civil society, companies, and other stakeholders in respect for the national circumstances in Greenland. But our economy is small, and access to climate finance would make a big difference in the Greenlandic efforts to mitigate climate change and adapt to the changes already taking place. Loss and damage are also major concerns for Greenlanders. The issue has been discussed countless times in recent years, and during the Parliament's autumn session this year, the Parliament voted for the establishment of a national finance mechanism for hunters, fishermen, and farmers who are victims of severe climatic events. In some ways, Greenland had created its own loss and damage fund for climate victims. 90% of the population of Greenland are indigenous Inuit, and our people are affected disproportionately by climate change. Climate finance, be it mitigation initiatives, adaptations of loss and damage, should be accessible to indigenous peoples from all regions of the world. Indigenous people, including Greenlandic Inuit, should not remain forgotten climate victims. Bueno, thank you.
Thank you, Minister Lund. Thank you, Minister Lund. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you honorable ministers to stay there at the table, and I'm going to ask you gentlemen, Mr. Chabrol and Mr. Isaac Solomon, to take a seat at the end there, if you will, please. Can we have the next slide, please? Mr. Solomon, we're keen to hear from you, sir.
Thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Caribbean Development Bank, I want to thank the organizers for giving us the opportunity to speak briefly to a potential game changer in our quest to ensure there is access to adequate and affordable finance for small island developing states, including those we represent in the Caribbean. We stand at the threshold of a critical moment for small island developing states. At the halfway point in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we acknowledge with concern that development progress is under threat due to the combined impacts of climate change, geopolitical tensions, and overlapping energy and food insecurity, as well as economic shocks. With our common future hanging in the balance, the stakes could not be higher. And we're fully aware, as I think most of you are, that the cost of action is way lower than the cost of inaction. Many of our countries in the region, like other SIDS, are caught in a development dilemma. Most are classified as middle and high-income countries with limited access to concessional financing from international financial institutions, and we have no better example than our British overseas territories. GNI, the widely used international metric of development progress, does not adequately capture the structural vulnerability factors that constrain growth and development in these islands. Recognizing these challenges and those related to limited access to adequate and affordable financing to respond, the call for a global response has garnered renewed impetus through prominent initiatives such as the Summit for a New Global Financial Pact in June 2023 and the Bridgetown Initiative. And I dare say that when we discuss issues about losers and winners, it means that we are ignoring the reform that these initiatives are calling for in the entire ecosystem. It is not just about the tool for financing. The United Nations High-Level Panel proposed a Multidimensional Vulnerability Index, which we heard about, that measures structural vulnerability and resilience and can be used to complement GNI per capita to influence assessments of a country's development progress and its access and allocation of concessional finance by donors and multilateral development banks. Leveraging the methodology of the UN MVI High-Level Panel, the Caribbean Development Bank has led the development of a Caribbean MVI to better capture the nature of development in Caribbean SIDS. 15 countries, which includes the overseas territories, who are not included in the UN MVI. This is the first step, and I think this is a point of departure from what we heard earlier. This is the first step in the broader vulnerability and resilience framework being developed by the bank. Each of these domains is disaggregated further into the 3 dimensions of sustainable development: economic, social, and environmental. Let me speak quickly to our framework, and I'm not going to go into the technical details, and I'm going faster than my normal cadence, so I hope that you will be able to keep up with me. The CDB has proposed 3 specific tools that focus on resilience and that better capture the vulnerability and resilience conditions in developing countries and SIDS. The tools comprise the internal resilience capacity metric, the recovery duration adjuster, and the vulnerability and resilience assessment tool, VRT. The IRC seeks to capture the reality that exogenous shocks in SIDS can lead to deep structural scars that persist long after the shock occurred and can lead to longer recovery times and higher costs for developing countries when compared with developed countries. The RDA is an application of the IRC and seeks to calculate the loss associated with a shock event and adjust GNI to take account of the fact that it can take developing countries longer to recover from an exogenous shock compared with developed countries. And the VRT is a diagnostic metric to further assess country-specific vulnerability and resilience conditions, including non-structural resilience factors. The IRC aims to expand upon the MVI framework by broadening the view of multidimensionality to encompass 5 dimensions: productive capacity, institutional, social, environmental, and financial of resilience. It introduces flexibility by allowing customization for specific shocks and country contexts, shifting its focus from the past to the future. The IRC is not a static snapshot, but considers initial conditions before shock, changes in vulnerability and resilience due to the shock, and the country's access to finance. I could speak about some preliminary analysis. I wouldn't go to the detail, only to tell you that our hypothesis has been proven by the initial test, that where countries have high per capita income, in our groupings, that the vulnerability is highest and the duration to recovery is longest. The UN system is being asked to use the MVI on a piloting basis, and for the Caribbean Multi-Vulnerability Index process is viewed by the bank as part of this testing phase. As a work in progress, the application of the CMVI needs to be further tested and advanced. So we recognize that we are not along the same path of many of the developments that we heard discussed earlier in terms of other regions and their MVIs, but I think this is an appropriate opportunity for us to collaborate and to ensure that we could come to a consensus and speak to this with a common voice within a particular range, of course, given the nuances in our particular countries. Thank you.
Mr. Solomon, thank you very much. Mr. Chabreau, we'd like to hear from you now, please.
Yes, thank you. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very glad to be here with you this evening. I am the last speaker after a long day, so I will try to be short. I'm not a researcher, I'm not a minister, so I will share with you an operational point of view from AFD, which is a bilateral bank and agency. Today, currently, the way we prioritize our investments in terms of geography and sectors and intervention is based on a large number of criteria, and vulnerability is taken into consideration. At the new Financial Pact Summit in Paris last June, there was a great deal of discussion about how to address climate change, fight against poverty, and vulnerability simultaneously. And of course, about the financial tools needed to do so. On behalf of AFD, I welcome the contribution you are making to this debate from a SIDS and OCT point of view via this new index. We do agree there is no single established definition of vulnerability, and we recognize the plural nature of vulnerability in this context. So AFD is conducting some research to better prioritize our interventions and target the use of specific financial instruments according to each country's situation. And in this research, oceanic countries are well in the scope. So we are also paying attention to the debates on the allocation of the resources based on vulnerability with the loss and damage fund, which has been decided during this COP. So the task is tough. It will be critical to clearly establish the limits and benefits of its approach. So my point is quite clear. We obviously want to do better, and we will be committed to operationalize the research and the political decisions that will follow. My second point may be more focused on the current portfolio and strategy of AFD, is that supporting SIDS and OCT resilience is at the core of our strategies. I'd like here to remind the long track record AFDAs in overseas territories, the Caribbean, South Pacific, and South Indian Ocean regions. This was, by the way, the AFD first raison d'être. In seeds, more specifically, AFD's actions are in line with European and French strategies and focus on two main priorities: strengthen the resilience of countries and preserve marine and coastal biodiversity and support sustainable blue economy. In 2019, we adopted a new approach to bring together overseas territories and neighboring countries, mostly seeds, in these three geographical basins, the Atlantic, the Indian, and the Pacific. And here, the aim is to better take into account the common challenges faced by these territories and to pool the efforts. So the core of this strategy is to seek synergies between OCT and seeds. And this should imply an improved and increased activities in small island states. I would like here to mention that we will very soon open AFD offices in Vanuatu and Fiji at the beginning of next year. However, you know it, our investment in seeds are submitted to many, many constraints. Seeds are the first victims of natural disasters, and this combined with the increasing frequency of these disasters implies a lot more investments. But considering the high level of debt and the fact that this is public debt and external debt, we at AFD are constrained by the Lagarde doctrine, and we are not able to provide the relevant financial support. So I have to admit that in this perspective, we do not fully achieve our commitments to support seeds in strengthening their resilience to the negative effects of climate change. This said, I would not like to finish on a pessimistic word, so how can institutions like us can address this and go beyond this strong constraint I just mentioned? Of course, I don't have any silver bullets, just a few ideas, mostly built on successful pilot initiative. I actually have 4 ideas I would like to share with you. The first one is to increase and expand initiatives promoting nature-based solutions with simplified access to finance. The little film we saw and the speeches from honorable ministers explain much better than I can do the importance of nature. But here I would like to mention the Kiwa initiative. The Kiwa initiative is a multi-donor program with France, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and EU, and the SPREP, that aims to build resilience to climate change through nature-based solutions by setting up, and this is an important point, a dedicated one-stop shop for this NBS project. So it's based on simplified access to climate change finance and NBS finance for local and national authorities, civil society, regional organizations in the Pacific countries and territories, including the French overseas. So far, Kiwa, it's 75 million euros and 23 local projects in fisheries management, mangrove restoration, agroecology, or water resource management. So it's still small, it's certainly not at scale, but it's commonly recognized as a very interesting initiative. So maybe an idea could be to scale up Kiwa, extend it to other geographies, but keep this one-stop shop idea, which is, I think, an interesting idea. The second point is to explore and support new financial mechanisms to engage with the private sector. And here, it's already been mentioned, but I would like to mention again carbon credits and maybe biodiversity credits. We see in carbon credits and biodiversity credits opportunities to additional north-south financial flows for development. And financial flows on the long term. Carbon credit can be up to 25 to 30 years, so that would enable the viability of the project far beyond our own investments. And of course, it is a way also to involve and engage the private sector. The third idea is to go beyond climate finance. And I would like here to have a kind of blue finance perspective. It's been very well mentioned in the film and different interventions. Many of the resources of the seeds depend on the ocean. So of course, this is why ocean and its resources need to be managed in a sustainable way. Many groups and initiatives are underway on blue economy and blue finance. This is actually quite an important debate in France because, as you know, and it will be increasingly growing, because France is organized with Costa Rica, will be organizing, in 2025, the next UN Ocean Conference. So maybe this UN Ocean Conference will be the good forum to increase blue finance. Blue finance aims to mobilize capital to support projects and activities that contribute to the protection of marine ecosystem, sustainable management, and the promotion of a sustainable blue economy. Financial instruments linked to blue finance include, of course, loans, traditional, sovereign, non-sovereign, grants, bonds, carbon credits, I've mentioned them, trust fund, of course, quite classical, and debt fund swaps. These tools have different characteristics, enabling them to be framed to the geographic, economic, and political contexts of each coastal and marine country so that a tailored approach can be built. I'd like here just to mention blue bonds. The first blue bond was issued in 2018 by the government of Seychelles with the support of the World Bank. Since then, there have been over 30 blue bonds issuance, mostly by governments and backed by supranational agencies, bilateral or multilateral banks. So today, blue bonds have really been aimed at seeds which are characterized by their limited land and the large margin area. Finally, and I could have started, this is my last idea, but I could have started with it, of course we need more and reinforced partnerships. We started with this, I'd like to finish with this. In territories where activity is limited by its mandate and by the financial condition I mentioned, this kind of partnership reflex is an imperative for AFD and AFD Group. Of course, our network of partners enables us to enhance our efficiency, increase our impact, and contribute to provide a relevant response to the region's challenge. We already work with OECS, IORA, SPC, PIF, EOC, PrEP, among others. We can do more. So to conclude, be sure of AFD's interests and commitment to improve the way vulnerability is considered and improve, this is important, the financial and technical offer for SIDS and OCTs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chabot. Now we're going to hear from Nicolas Chenet, who's going to give some closing remarks.
Hello, everybody. Sorry to interrupt, but it's already 8 p.m., so I appreciate if we wrap this up pretty quickly. Thank you.
It's going to be very brief. Thank you very much. I won't have to be long anyway because I think the panel and all the speeches were really clear and very conclusive. So just a few words to say that I think what was shown that we need new approaches and we need it now. So I think it was really highlighted by all the speakers. This is a complex topic in terms of science, in terms of multifactorial interdependent factors also, but still it's something that is evolving, and I think we are going quite well on that. So I think science is also designed for, I think, a public response and public awareness. So that's something that could be really used. We heard a very strong word from you ministers, and I think about also the duplication, and I think of the effect of this hazard, of course. Just to remember also that your territories are also, well, of course, very low emitting countries, but still doing things about mitigation. And I think that's also very important to say that you are playing the game of this COP and this mitigation, and that it shouldn't be forbidden when we are talking about all these issues, and of course that you are the victim of this adaptation that you are submitting. I heard the survival mode in which you are with these catastrophes, and I think it should be heard. I'm not supposed to go into the political issue about your status, but just to mention that maybe it shouldn't be only a side event. That's something that should be advocated also a bit more in the negotiation rooms. And then, well, maybe hoping that I think the finance is moving. We heard many ideas and many issues. I think the importance of being grouped to raise the attention and maybe to attract the financing as SIDS is very important. And I think, well, it's something that also the purpose of this kind of project and of this kind of events. The importance of science again, and I think this index is a good opportunity to attract the attention and maybe to mobilize, and I remember what we said, that won't be losers anyway, but to attract more finance. The importance of valuing also the nature, the carbon, the biodiversity, I think that shouldn't be forgotten, because that's something that you are really, I mean, well, it's something that is concerning, of course, all the planet, and the importance, I would say, of being creative. We have to be creative in the way we are functioning, creative about the finance, but we have to be creative right now. So I'm really happy about all the speeches, and I would like to thank the organizers, because I think that was a very interesting way of putting together ideas that have to encounter, and I think that's something that we can really rely on to be sure that we would be conclusive in the next conferences, and we hope that we will find this kind of mechanisms very early, because we need it very urgently. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chenet. That concludes our panel. I'm afraid we didn't have an opportunity to take questions from you all, but we have prepared a canapé and some cool drinks, alcoholic and non-alcoholic, just around the corner. We invite you all to join us there over drinks and food, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions of the honorable ministers and other panelists that you didn't have an opportunity to ask questions of earlier. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank all of our panelists, and look forward to seeing you at the building.